Hey guys, welcome to the Dawg House Podcast. On this week's episode, we got a great return guest, Seth Saunders from the Saturday in Athens podcast, as we talk about Georgia's G Day, which is this Saturday at 1 p.m. on SEC Network and ESPN Plus. Also, we talk about is Carson Beck the best quarterback in college football in 2024, and the Mason Short commitment, four-star offensive lineman from Evans. Also, Dawg House Podcast is going to be a part of the College Huddle, which is a brand new community for all podcasters across the nation. I'm privileged to be a part of this. Make sure and check all that out on collegehuddle.com. They have their own website. Also, like, subscribe, and share the podcast. That really helps out. Great return guest, Seth Saunders from the Saturday in Athens podcast. How we doing today, Seth?
Doing awesome, brother. We got football this week. Can't be anything but good, right?
That's correct. Got a G Day coming up. It's going to be Saturday, April 13th at 1 p.m. SEC Plus, ESPN Plus. I think for all the traditional people, I'm not sure, you might have to watch that on a replay for maybe the older generation, but at least we're getting some football.
Yeah,
And
man.
we,
I like chomping at the bit for it. It's been, January obviously wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it was ages ago. I'm just ready for them to hear some pads popping and seeing them let it rip.
exactly. And we were talking earlier, you're going to be there in person. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to be there. I am getting into town on Friday. I'm going to go to the baseball game on Friday night and take that in. Hopefully, see Charlie Condon put some balls in the parking lot, and
Yeah.
yeah, then be amped up to go to the ball game on Saturday. I think weather's supposed to be magnificent. I think it's going to be a Chamber of Commerce day, so I cannot wait. I'm counting the minutes.
That's awesome, man. And then what kind of tailgate are you going to do? I think a church, is it the church of the tailgate that you do? Any kind of special for G Day?
Yeah, the Church of Tailgate. I love it. Yeah, so no, I'm not gonna have anything formal for on Saturday. I think I actually what I'm gonna try to do is just roam around and try to see some people. I don't get to Athens as often as I would like, and so I'm gonna try to take advantage of it and see folks that I haven't gotten to see in a little while. And obviously, the season's great because you get these different touch points and see folks, and then once the season's over, you don't get to see people in person. And so I'm just excited to try and be a little bit of a vagabond and move around to different places and just see everybody and catch up and fellowship. And yeah, man, just enjoy it.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then looking at the game, what players are you excited to see for the G Day game?
I think for me, it's probably multiple guys. I'm gonna go position groups. How about
Yeah,
that?
sure.
Because I think there are four position groups that I'm very, very interested to see. And first one for me is a running back group, right? Like you lose so much from a known commodity perspective. And I know, we've seen obviously what Trevor Etienne can do at Florida, but we don't know what he's going to look like at Georgia. And we've seen a little bit what Roger Robinson can do, but we don't know what that'll look like in a fuller dose. And so, we've gotten spurts of cash and we've gotten to see looks at folks. But I mean, essentially, brother, it's going to be a whole new running back core. So I am interested to see how all that looks. And I think this is normal, looks at the rushing piece of it.
Right.
The thing I'm always most interested in is how are the guys going to be in pass pro? Because we're going to fling it and Carson's going to be the guy. And so which one of these guys is going to step up and be able to pass pro and be able to catch audibles and pick up blitzes and all these different things? And so I'm interested in that. The other thing I'm interested in is what the receiving core looks like, and I'm going to throw Oscar Delp into that equation as well. We talked about this on our show, but Seth Emerson did an article, I guess it was 3 years ago now, maybe, where he talked about and he cited another statistic or another article talking about returning receiving yards production and how that indicates how a team is going to perform. And I think if I ran the numbers right, Georgia's losing like 2,100 receiving yards from last year's team, which is almost half of what they had. And so, I'm interested, man. Obviously, they added some bodies via the transfer portal. You got guys that are on the roster that are going to get more run. So we see how that looks. But you just think about losing guys like Ladd and like Rojak and like Brock, and you start to go, look, man, big shoes to fill. And so fired up to hear about how good a spring that Dom's having, and I think Dylan Bell is obviously going to emerge. So I want to see how they look with everything. Man, if you listen to our show at all, you know how much we love Arian Smith. And so I loved hearing Kirby talk about him and the time they've been putting in with Arian. And so I'm excited to see him and kind of how he can take the lid off the defense. And then NFL draft's coming up, the 25th? Brother, we're losing a lot in the secondary to the NFL draft. And so the secondary composition is very interesting to me. You know, Malachi's been hurt, so obviously hasn't been running a lot with spring practice. And so I'm interested to see that group, whether it be at corner, at safety, at star, whatever it may be. I want to see how everybody looks. And then, D-line. I think D-line is something that was not maybe talked about a ton last season. But I think if we're talking brass tacks and what the difference was between last year's defense and last year's team and the previous two iterations, the back-to-back national champion teams, D-line was a little bit different. I'm not saying they were bad or anything like that. They just were different. They didn't have, as Coach Smart has quotably said the last couple of weeks, they didn't have a train record, right? And so I think it remains to be seen what that'll look like. So a very long-winded answer, but those are kind of the four position groups that I am going to be very keenly tuned into come Saturday.
Yeah, completely agree. Heard good things about Dominic Lovett. Also heard good things about Colby Young. I know he had a little bit of an ankle injury, but I heard he's looked great. Maybe kind of like that Lawrence Cager-esque, going to be a big
Yeah.
in the red zone. Also, tight end Oscar Delp got Lawson Lucky. He looked really great last spring, but had that ankle injury. Also, going into that, nitpicky, I'm going to be a little nitpicky, and that was one of my questions. You kind of answered, but I kind of ask it. Do you think the D line is a position of weakness this year, potentially for Georgia?
I think weakness is probably too strong a term.
Right.
I think they have good depth along the defensive line. And I think we have to be careful too about what the comparison model looks like too, right? Because we're talking, do they have a Trayvon Walker? Do they have a Jordan Davis? Do they have a Devontae Wyatt? Do they have a Jalen Carter? I think the answer today, April 9th, is no. But we don't know that, right? There could be somebody that emerges and takes a next step, whether that's Christian Miller or whether that, whoever it may be, right? And so I think that remains to be seen. Is it a position to watch? Yes, I think it is, because I think everybody feels pretty good about how the linebacking core is going to look. I think inside out, they're going to be fine. I think there's a ton of talent in that area. And even with what they're having to replace in the secondary, I don't think anybody has consternation about continuity in the secondary. I think everybody knows Kirby don't really miss in the secondary. So I think everybody feels okay about how that's going to look. Maybe there's going to be some growing pains as guys get snaps and get looks, but I don't think anybody's necessarily concerned about it. So is the D-line the area that I probably have the most unknown about? Yeah, for sure. I have unanswered questions that I would like to get some answers to with that group. But just given what the transition is going to be, I don't know that that's going to necessarily be a weakness, right? Like they're going to be good at the point of attack, and we're going to be just fine. I think the big difference for me last year, and you tell me if you felt this way too, I just felt like the second level, meaning the linebacking core, was less free to roam last year than they have been in years past, because the D-line just didn't require the bodies that they required the previous 2 years. And so I'm interested this on Saturday and then into the fall to see, are there guys that are going to require the attention of two blockers instead of one, and then allow the inside linebackers and the outside linebackers to have free space, or even just to have an extra second to not have a body on them, right? To make a move or to come downhill. So I think that's the thing I'm most fascinated about with this group as we're kind of hurtling into the 2024 season.
Yeah, I think it was. I think the D line was good. It wasn't great. It didn't have, of course, the Jalen Carter, Jordan Davises, and then maybe Pop Dumas Johnson maybe had a little bit of a down year, and then he kind of had the injury, and then he did
Yep.
transfer. You might have saw the writing on the wall, but I just felt like we just came out a little flat in the wrong game of all games.
Yeah.
still believe we potentially could have beat Michigan, won the national title, just had a flat game. And then I know that's a long debate is us going from 1-6, Bama getting in, all those things. I just think we just had a bad game, but overall it was a good defense, maybe not a great or an elite defense, but they were good enough to, get you to the playoffs. But as we know, that didn't work out.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about Pop, and it'll always be an unknown. We'll never know for sure. But I do wonder. I felt like coming into the back quarter of the season, I'll be honest with you, I thought Pop was out of shape. And I thought he was out of shape until the last quarter of the year. And I think the game he got injured was the first game where you went, oh, there's Pop. Like, he's everywhere. Like, we're used to seeing. And so I am very curious to see how that defense would have looked going into the title game if he's healthy, because it's well known that there were some busts on defense with young linebackers that likely don't happen with somebody who is more experienced. So, it's a game of 2 or 3 plays that swing that pendulum. And so I have said this as much as I can say it. I said it all through last season. There was one team on Georgia's schedule that could beat Georgia, and it was Georgia. And they beat themselves in Atlanta. I'm not trying to take anything away from Alabama. Look, Alabama whipped them up one side of the offensive and defensive line and down the other for 2 halves. Okay, Alabama did everything they needed to do. All I'm saying is, even given that, it was still a 27-24 football game. And if Georgia doesn't make the mistakes that they make, miss a field goal that they never miss after a penalty that they never had, you know what I'm saying? It's just all these things where, man, they just shot themselves. And not having guys, I think, hurts that too. We could have a debate about Ladd's health, Brock's health, and how that manifested itself in the game and all those type things. And so, God, there's so many what ifs. But the flip side of that is there's 1,000 what ifs from the 2 seasons where we win the title. That's just part of it. You got to have stuff go right. And part of that is health. And part of that is having guys there that you need to have there. So maybe it ends up being a blessing in disguise at inside linebacker, because we got guys really, really valuable hot game action snaps last year where they can now transition in as saltier, I would say, than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, completely agree. All those are great points. But yeah, we'll see. I agree about the Pop thing. And I forget the guy. I should know his name. Is it 30, the guy that replaced him, the younger guy? I think he saw the writing on the wall. Who's the linebacker? I forgot.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Now I'm drawing a blank too. But yes, not Raylan Wilson, but
I can't think of him either. I should know.
I'm having a complete brain blank right now.
No problem. We'll try to get back. We'll get back to that. But transition to that. Want to give a great sponsor for our show, VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. 0 carbs, 0 sugar. Great for the Masters coming up. Great for the pool. We'll be here before you know it. It'll be pool season. And also got the G-Day game and all the other games. Great to check that out. My personal favorite is the watermelon, elderberry, and huckleberry. But for 20% off, Dawg House 20. Again, that's Dawg House 20 for 20% off. VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. Great sponsor of the show. And jumping right into it, I did want to ask kind of maybe a hot take question, but it is that type season going into it. Do you think Carson Beck could be the best quarterback in college football next year?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think we do need to temper some things. Okay, that you're losing Ladd, who was super reliable. You're losing Brock, who was, in my opinion, unquestionably the best player in college football. And so not having those weapons is important. I'll tell you this. I think this is going to evidence itself as the season plays out. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, I think, is one of the more underappreciated players that's been at Georgia, maybe in the last decade. What he did from a totality perspective, blocking, making big plays, being steady, I think his presence will be missed. So I am interested to see who kind of flows into that role too. But Carson has all of the tools and a year of seasoning under his belt where if he just controls his controllables and does what he's supposed to do, he will have every opportunity to be in the Heisman conversation all year long. And maybe be sitting in New York if he does what he's capable of doing. I mean, arm strength obviously is not a question. He can make all the throws. He will be an NFL guy, first rounder next year, unless something goes catastrophically wrong this year. There's going to be plenty of talent at wideout. I mean, that's another one that was injured in Atlanta. Ra Thomas doesn't play. I mean,
Right.
Ra was super dynamic last year. Dom is obviously progressing. Dylan Bell is going to be a problem for people. Oscar is fantastic. I mean, and there are going to be plenty of weapons there. And the offensive line could end up being better this year than it was last year, which is kind of crazy to talk about and say, but that's just the reality. I mean, that offensive line group is going to be as good as any in the country. So I think he's going to have clean pocket a good amount of times and be able to make the throws that he wants to make. And it's certainly not going to hurt having that year of confidence and gone into some big environments and played and taken your licks and all those type things. The schedule is a little bit different this year, though. No, I mean, there's some tough road games. You got a neutral site game to open the year against a tough opponent. I mean, I think there are some different variables in place. But again, I think if Carson controls what he can control, I think he's got every opportunity to have a really magical season.
Completely agree. And I think with the big time matchups, if he can light up or have big games against Alabama, at Texas on the big stage, Ole Miss, I think that's going to catapult him in there. And at least definitely get an invite, possibly could win it. I think he needs to get maybe that 30 plus touchdown.
Yeah.
And then maybe close to 4,000 yards if they do that. But if we do have a good running game, that might take a little bit away. As we know, Kirby he'll lean on him if he can. But definitely think he has potential to at least get an invite.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I mean, I think they've shown more of a proclivity the last 2 seasons to sling it a little bit. And I think the problem has more been they've just dump trucked so many opponents that you just don't get the same amount of attempts or snaps because the game's over. And I think that's been tough. I think that was part of Stetson's problem when he was there, is he just didn't have these gaudy numbers to back it up. Where I think if you were having a apples to apples conversation about who impacted his team and their success the most, hard not to say Stetson didn't, especially in his second year, the year that he was in New York. So that'll become the conversation with Carson. I think because of the lack of a known commodity or featured back at running back, and then really not known commodities at wideout, Carson's going to have a lot of name recognition, which is helpful. And he's going to be on one of the best teams in America, which is also helpful. And then he's playing for, I think, I guess nothing's ever unanimous, but pretty close to consensus, best coach in America with Kirby. So he's going to have a lot of variables going for him. And to your point, he's going to have some monster matchups in bright light games where he'll have an opportunity to shine.
Yes. And completely agree. Great points there. I did cheat a little bit. CJ Allen. That's who I was thinking.
CJ Allen. Yes, that's it. God, I'm glad you said that because that was going to have me gnawing on that for the next 20 minutes.
Exactly. Him and Smile Monday, and I think CJ Allen might get a little bit of an upgrade. Pop was great, but he can go side to side, headhunter. So I think we're going to be good in the long run. We got some other young linebackers, so I think we'll be okay.
CJ reminds me of Rennie Kern. Runs well, super good athlete, and he's just built like the kind of guy that you're just not going to run through him. I just think he's a really diverse player. I know some people have thrown some Nakobe comparisons out, but I'm old, so I'll take it back to Rennie.
There you go. I got you. That's a great comparison. Also, want to talk a little bit of recruiting news. Georgia got a big O-line, 4-star offensive lineman from Evans, Georgia. Mason Short actually had him on the podcast a while back, so that was a big get. He was Alabama commit, and then when Saban left, he decided to make a change. But good kid, good values. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", 312, a little lean, but they can definitely add some weight to him. But I think it's a good pickup, and always good to add depth and potentially a starter in the future. So 4-star Mason Short from Evans, Georgia. Also, my nephew goes to the same school, so pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I thought that was a great get, man. And I think Kirby's been insistent about this since he got there, but their focus on building the offensive and defensive lines is going to stay consistent. And anytime you can get a kid of that caliber, especially in state, to commit to UGA, it's outstanding. And it makes it, I think, even a little sweeter when you take somebody out of the recruiting class for Alabama, which we'll see what happens. But I think you're going to see that more and more because I think kids are susceptible to marketing just like everybody else. And Kirby is now the brand, I think, from a head coaching perspective in college football, which I think as Georgia fans, in some ways, hard for us to kind of reconcile and wrap our brains around because we're not used to being the spotlight kids, which I know some other schools would probably say that's ridiculous, but it's true, right? Like even when Coach Rick was there, it's not like we were deemed this the preeminent school in the SEC. It just wasn't the case. I mean, they were going to talk about Urban or they were going to talk about Nick or it was going to be Les Miles at LSU or whoever, name the coach that wasn't Coach Rick. But that's all changed with Kirby. I mean, UGA is the standard now. Now that Nick's out at Alabama, Athens is the mountaintop. And that's going to be part of, I think, the progression over the next 5 to 6 years, too, is stepping into that role and the kids that come in, understanding that and embracing that, what the expectation is and just knowing that it's excellence or nothing. That's it. There is no in between anymore. That's what people want and what people expect. I mean, think about this year. How different was it? Or I had a hard time kind of processing this, but and I feel bad saying this, I was disappointed with how the season went. They lost one time, right? But
Yeah.
they didn't go to the playoffs. And that has become now what the expectation is. We're supposed to be excellent. We're supposed to be in the mix. We're supposed to be in the dance. And to not be there, it felt like, they're playing the Orange Bowl. It doesn't really matter. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was just, it was different. And
Yes.
I love that that's how it is now, but it's just a different metric than it has been ever before. And so I think that is something from a program perspective that they have to be cognizant of and not be scared of, not run away from, but embrace and just say, yeah, that is the standard. And we will be disappointed unless that's where we are.
Yeah, completely agree on Kirby. All great analysis there. But 29 straight back-to-back national titles. And then that stat, you might have already heard it, hasn't lost to a Power Five active coach since 2018, when you think
Yeah.
about it. And I mean, you lost to Aldron 2019. He's not even coaching anymore. Of course, Nick Saban retired. So, you're working on 6 years with any active coaches. And
Yeah.
all these crazy SEC stats I've looked at before, I can't remember them. And when all the big rivals they've dominated. Say, I mean, this is just we're the cream of the crop, as you say, and he's hands down to me right now the number one coach.
Yeah.
I'll debate with anybody. Can't I mean Dabo's got two, but he's coming off 8-4 and whatever bowl game it was. Yeah,
Yeah, and my thing is Kirby is so dangerous because of what he's capable of
yeah,
from a player personnel perspective. I mean, I just we've said this a ton, but you just can't convince me that there's anybody better in the living room than Kirby Paul Smart. There's just not. I mean, he is electric. And you see it when he has speaking engagements, you see it when he is interviewed. He's magnetic, man. And I think it's such a full package because he played there. It's his alma mater.
Mhm.
There's just so much to it, and he's just got to be tough to beat. And I know NIL in a lot of ways has leveled the playing field on that,
Yeah.
but even in that regard, man, I don't think they're missing. I think they get who they want to get, and I also think what I love too about what they do from a personnel perspective is it's not star chasing.
Mhm.
They are recruiting the guys that they think fit their system, their program, and the mentality that's necessary
Yeah.
to succeed in that system over the long haul. They don't want the Coach Calipari one and done type thing, right? Like they
Right.
want guys who want to wear the G. And I think they're very cognizant of that in the recruiting process.
Yeah. I think they're building it, and we've seen it. Kirby's gonna he might spend a little more on NIL for that big D lineman, O lineman. They're gonna road grade you and punch you in the mouth and wear you down. And then you might get maybe a lesser 4-star quarterback that can run the system that he wants, running backs and wide receivers, skill position. But I think O line and D line, he's going to beat you there, and then he's going to outcoach you with maybe the lesser talent players, like still good, and he's going to beat you that way with a complete team. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, too, the other thing that's a little undersold and obviously hard to quantify, but I think he has created a culture where the expectation up and down the roster is they're supposed to win. And so because of that, even when it doesn't look like they should win, I think you go back even to Missouri 2 years ago in Columbia, and they shouldn't have won that football game. But the expectation was we're supposed to win. And that matters. And again, you can't quantify that, and there's no metric to put around that, but it's real. And if you were here when it wasn't that way,
Oh yeah.
you feel it. You feel the difference. I mean, look, that Ohio State game in the Peach Bowl, they shouldn't have won that game. Everybody in their mama knows they shouldn't have won that game, and they wouldn't have won that game previously.
Yeah.
But that's the difference now. Is the expectation is, well, we're supposed to win, and so we've seen it with Alabama for decades, and we're starting to see that shift now in Athens.
All right. Completely agree. They're to the point where we used to be. We hope we're going to win. Now we know we're going to win. So yeah.
Yep, exactly.
And then I real quick wanted to ask, so we got 2024 schedule we touched on. It's going to be brutal, at Ole Miss, at Texas, at Alabama, but wanted to see your thoughts on changing to the 12-team playoffs. And then from Georgia's perspective, I've kind of mentioned it, just with a brutal schedule, if they by chance could maybe go 10-2, and then this is the SEC championship having a lesser meaning this year, and it's more of this is a marathon, not a sprint. Is if you go 10-2, maybe get in that top 8, 6 or 8, kind of like a Missouri, and maybe even if you miss the SEC championship game, you could save your legs and play this gauntlet of a season. What's your thoughts on the whole, with it being brutal schedule? Georgia could go maybe 10-2, 11-1, and still make playoffs.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think if they go 10-2 with this schedule, they're in. I don't even know if it's a question. I mean, look, some of that'll be dependent on what happens across the rest of the country. But if two of those losses are a field goal loss in Tuscaloosa and a field goal loss in Austin, they're in. I just don't think there's any way they're not, because they're going to look like they should be in. We know that. And yeah, I think 10-2 they're in for sure. The 12-team playoff it's going to be a different animal. We've talked about this. Myself and my co-host both went to FCS schools, so Division I AA schools. So my exposure firsthand is to a big playoff system. I think when we were in college, it was only 16 then, and it's 24 now. And the great part about it, and I think this is the argument that hasn't been made, is that there's no hand wringing, because when the field's that big, it's tough to make arguments that somebody should have been in or shouldn't have been in. I mean, look, man, 12's plenty. I would have been fine with 8, to be honest. But 12, 16, whatever it is, more football, I'm okay with. And I love the proposition of having big-time playoff games on campuses. I wish they would extend that piece to the first 2 rounds, because I do think it's a little bit crazy that if you're a top 4 seed, you don't get a home playoff game. I think that's nuts. But I understand that they're married to this bowl system currently, and so they're trying to honor that. But I think eventually we'll get to a point where stuff's on campus. That's how it is at the FCS level. You play on campus all the way until a title game, and then I think it's in Frisco now. It was in Chattanooga when we were in school, but I love it because it's on the field. If you win, you go, and if you lose, you're out. And I love that. And the other piece, the argument I've always made is every other level of football in America, all right, high school, every other level of college, the NFL, they have a playoff. And at the FBS level for so many years, and obviously so much of it was economically driven, but you just didn't do that. And it used to drive me nuts. Like, why aren't we playing these games to understand who actually is the best instead of leaving it in the hands of like 56 sports writers? Like, this seems insane to me. So I'm fired up about that. And obviously I would have felt a lot better about last season if that was the case. Because look, did we deserve to get in last year? No, we didn't. We had control over getting in, and we didn't take care of our business. So I'm okay with that. Was Georgia one of the best 4 teams in America? Yes. If that's the actual metric, then yes, they should have been in, but it's not, man. There's politics involved in all those things. So when they dropped to 6, I wasn't surprised at all. in a 12-team model without Nick Saban, I think they'll have to lose 3 to not be in. That's my thought today.
Yeah.
Now, could that change if a bunch of teams that we don't think are going to be good end up being 11-1 and kind of staking their claim at the table? Maybe, but I just think with that schedule, playing in the SEC with the brand that Georgia is now, 10-2, I'd be shocked if they're not in.
Same here. I think it'd be very, very comparable like Missouri. I think when Missouri ended up like 6th or 7th or something, which is kind of right
Yeah,
on. I don't really want us to if you lose 2, got to go on the road out of Michigan, at Ohio State in December. We know how that is, Georgia
yeah,
boys in the cold. So I'm hoping
yeah,
some good climate condition weather.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then yeah, really appreciate you coming on today, Seth. How do we follow you on social media? I know you guys got a lot of things going on.
Yeah. We're on all platforms. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're even on TikTok, which is laugh out loud funny given my age and my co-host's age. But we're on TikTok too. We're on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube. I would say we're probably most active on Instagram, especially in season. But we try to be equally as active across the different platforms just because there are different followers and different opportunities. So yeah, follow us on all of there. Reach out to us. Our email is in the bios for all those. If you ever have questions or want to chat with us about something, reach out. We'd love that, man. DM us. We want to interact with people. Our best part about this is it gives us a community that we didn't have before we started the show. So yeah, Trey, I appreciate the invite to come on, man. I always love getting to chat with you and embark a little bit. And yeah, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. You got over 10,000 followers on Instagram. That's impressive.
Yeah, man, that happened last season, which is great. It's cool. It's given us a lot more exposure than we previously had. We started this thing. Obviously, I've been pretty open about it. My coach and I, neither of us went to UGA,
Right.
and so we didn't have built-in community there. When we started this thing back in 2020, we had like 4 followers when we started, and so over the 4+ years of doing it, to see it grow and to see people now like actively interacting with the stuff that we post, it's been wild, man. And to get to go to SEC Media Days last year was an incredible experience. And
Awesome.
the plan is to kind of reset this year and do some more content, hopefully exciting stuff, have more guests like we've had in the past, and keep growing it. And we're just so grateful for the support of dog fans everywhere. So yeah, man, that's been incredible.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. And I really enjoy those like Saturday mornings, almost like some WWE promos that you've done. Those are always really
Yeah, man, I'm in for that. I'm always amped up, and it's kind of a way for me to let it out a little bit. So I
yeah.
enjoyed people responding to those this year. It was great.
That's awesome. Make sure and check Seth out on the Saturday in Athens podcast on all the major platforms, Twitter, Instagram, all those things. And I really appreciate him coming on. And if everyone's still around, make sure to like, subscribe, and like, comment, and share all those things. Like the T-shirt said, got this from my girlfriend for a recent birthday, so that's pretty cool. So I finally got some
I
merch.
love
I
that.
feel like it's official.
Yeah, I love that, brother. Yeah, everybody get on it, man. Trey's doing great work. So make
Yeah,
sure and follow his stuff and support him.
yeah, appreciate it. Thanks again, Seth. I really appreciate it.
All right, Trey, anytime, brother. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.